Hey, what's going on, good people? It's Gardner Douglas, your Oyster Ninja. I'm here with these beautiful folks. You probably recognize them as Fisher Island oysters, but these guys are legends in the game. If you want to know how to do it, you go and see these good folks. And I'm just going to let them introduce themselves, and we'll go from there. How's it going, Sarah?
It's good. Good. Nice to see you, Gardner. We are Sarah and Steve Malinowski, and we've been farming for almost
41 years.
41 years. Whew, wow.
Started out as a clam farm. Initially, that didn't do it for us, and we pivoted to oysters about 35 years ago, and have been growing oysters ever since. And our business is it's really a combination of growing and selling oysters to restaurants and individuals, and growing seed and selling that seed to other farms.
And I would just like to say that we started out very small, and for 15 years, it was pretty much Steve and myself and maybe one or two other people, sometimes part-time people, and built everything ourselves. Just, it took a long, sort of slow process, long, slow, determined process with a lot of, I would say, perseverance. And things started, I don't know. Go.
Well, I think that the real breakthrough for us was having the opportunity to move to a house that had access to water, that was on the water. And what's been really fun about the process is that our business is basically in our backyard, and we've always worked out of our house. Our kids at one time or another all work for us, and so it's been a definitely challenging but really rewarding experience.
And in that sense, in every sort of, we really did have a family farm. And that was just sort of the life that our children grew up in as farmers. And you don't really think of that with oyster farmers, but every spring break, every summer break, afternoons, days off, we were all working together and that was, I think that was really the most important thing for us, is that we wanted a lifestyle. We wanted to be with our kids, and we didn't want to have, our commute is 5 minutes, to 1 minute.
Often by boat.
And so we feel very lucky that we pulled it off, and that, and I think all of our kids, they complained a lot along the way, but I think they all really appreciate having that kind of a upbringing.
So 40 some years ago, like, what was the motivation to start a farm? Like, who else was doing it, first of all? And like, just what was the motivation to start a farm?
There were very few people doing it. And I was in graduate school at the time and studying clams. And at that time, there was some research that was done at FIMS by a couple of very influential biologists, very influential in the shellfish world. And they were doing experiments on how to grow clams, and actually produced a little manual on how to do it. And so while I was doing my research at school, I got very interested in farming clams. And so while I was at school, we set up a little pilot scale farm, and thought we were going to be clam barons, but it never worked out.
Well, and Steve even wrote a booklet on how to grow clams if you lived in urban areas for New York City. You got a grant to, so you also.
Yeah, we supported ourselves for the first 7 years doing grant supported research. At that time, there were very few people trying to do what we were doing. And at the same time, both the federal government and the state of New York were were keen on trying to create an aquaculture industry. So there was grant money available. And we took advantage of that, and that supported us for about the first 7 years.
Nice, that's awesome. So even back then, it was important to the government to, really get things going in aquaculture.
What was the reason? Why did they?
Well, Carter, I think it's all related to declining wild stocks. Some of the earliest programs that the government had related to shellfish farming had to do with job training for fishermen that were out of work because the resource was just not there anymore.
Well, yeah, and we'll talk about that a little bit more, as we go on. But I just want to talk a little bit more about just bringing the family together and everybody working on the farm. And I know why was it so important for you guys to get the young kids involved?
I really think that there's a little bit of, I don't want to use the word hippie too much, but our friends were sort of getting out of college and all planning to go to Wall Street or do something like that. And we just wanted to do something different. We didn't want to, I don't know.
Yeah, and I think that the what was important to us was where we lived, and we actually decided to settle on Fisher's Island before we figured out what we were going to do for a living, and kind of made it work.
Well, and so that's a good point. So most people on Fisher's Island, it's a summer resort community, and most of our friends out here work for the summer seasonal people for the most part, either working, construction or in some kind of service industry. And we wanted to figure out how we could have a business that wasn't dependent on the summer community. So that was also important. But I think we really just didn't want, both of our dads went to the office, both of our moms were homemakers, and we just want to try something different.
Right. So are there any fun facts about Fisher Island that, people don't know about, or even like the area where you guys raise your oysters now?
Well, one fun fact would be that the nursery pond where we grow oysters for the first year used to be a freshwater reservoir here on the island, and the 38 hurricane breached it, turned it to salt. The military at that time, which was a large presence on the island, there's actually quite extensive remnants of the fort that was here that's still here. The military at that time actually pumped this 35-acre pond out until it became fresh, and it became the reservoir again. And then about 10 years after that, there was another storm that breached it, and they gave up on it. So since then, it's been a brackish water pond, and we get our water from wells now here on the island, and not a reservoir.
Well, we have 230 year-round residents here. And speaking of the fort, Fisher's Island was sort of the furthest outpost protecting New York and New York Harbor for both World War. I think it's even, the fort was developed in the late 1800s and then was active through the Second World War. And there's forts here on Fisher's Island, and then Plum Island, Gardiner's Island, in fact, Go Island, and then all these, way out there. How many miles from New York City are we?
Oh, probably almost 100.
But so any submarine or any warship or something that would come, I don't think any ever came. There's a lot of practices and
at that time, there are 230 people that live here year round now. At that time, there were more than 5,000 people that were stationed here.
Wow, it's like a ghost town now then
Yes.
compared to then.
You know, it's the military presence. The history of the military presence is a lot like Governor's Island, where you know there are. In fact, we have an officers' row here on Fisher's Island that looks a lot like the officers' row on Governor's Island.
Nice.
Mhm.
So let's just talk about your oysters a little bit. So I was reading on your website, you guys do the bottom growing for the oysters?
No bottom.
No bottom. Uh-oh.
We're suspension culture.
No, what does that mean, suspension culture?
So we grow the oysters in nets that we suspend from long lines of buoys. So the oysters are actually in the water column. They never hit the bottom. And it's, we feel, the most sustainable way to grow oysters, because we have absolutely zero negative impact on the environment, and actually quite a bit of positive impact on the environment. If you want to think of it this way, it's as if if you went into a forest area and you wanted to create a farm, you would have to cut down the trees and the forest would disappear, and then you would cultivate your crops. Well, the analogy would be if you could somehow leave that forest there and cultivate your crops on top of it without disturbing the forest. That's essentially what we're doing with our system.
Yeah, I read my note now. It's off bottom farming.
Off bottom.
Sorry about that. So you guys, what makes your oysters so distinct, like far as flavor, or even like the cup shape or anything?
Well, I think we're very fortunate. When we were looking around for a site to grow our oysters, there wasn't, we didn't have many choices. And we ended up with this sort of 5-acre site behind a rock pile, sort of in our largest harbor. And so oysters taste, and it's all about the water they're grown in. But we have a huge tidal influx twice a 24-hour period that comes from the ocean. And when it comes storming down Fisher's Island Sound, which ends up in Long Island Sound, there's an eddy that it hits the rock pile and circles over our oysters, and it's cold, salty, briny water. So it's really an ocean influence, not
rather than an estuarine influence.
Yeah. And so every oyster, it's the luck of where they're growing is where their taste comes from.
So as far as the shape and the depth of the cup, that is something that we have a hatchery, and so we're spawning oysters. And when what we do is, when we're packing and shipping oysters, we pick out a couple of hundred of what we think are the most beautiful oysters that we have. What we would love 100% of the oysters in our boxes to be. And we use those for the parent stock. And we've been able to increase the growth rate. We've been able to increase the depth of the cup. The depth of the cup, however, also has to do with the growing technique that we use. It's very labor intensive. We handle those nets and our oysters a lot. And when you handle oysters a lot, it tends to make them deeper.
So, like, I know you said you guys did the clams at first, but like, what types of studies helped you along the way? Because you guys are perfecting it, obviously. With putting those 100 or so to the side, that parent stock. Like, where did this knowledge come from, or did it just trial and error?
Lots of trial and error. Lots of killing oysters.
Lots of error.
Lots of error.
With the infamous. I got you.
It's interesting because there's a lot of what all of us in this industry do is there is science behind it, but there's definitely an art form to it. So it's like a combination. what everybody's doing, it has a solid grounding in that science, but everybody does it a different way, and everybody figures out a different way to do it. And usually people figure that out by trying to do it and by trial and error. But
Now, I think I ask every oyster farmer this question, but what's the biggest changes you've seen in the water quality over the years?
well, we are very lucky, and we're lucky for the reasons that Sarah pointed out concerning our site, where our water quality is dependent on the water quality of the ocean, and that presumably will be the last to go. We're not in an estuary. We're not really influenced by any kind of industrial or domestic pollution. We're just very fortunate to be in a site where we get this oceanic water that comes through our site.
And we have we don't have huge high tides, but we have huge tidal flow. So sometimes when we get one of these sort of what we think of as climate change storms, with really intense, fast, a lot of rain in a short amount of time, the Connecticut River, the Thames River, the Mystic River, these are the rivers along Connecticut that are across from us. Then usually, we're very concerned, depending on when it happens and if it would get over to Fisher's Island, but usually it's taken out to sea or it's goes to New York City instead of us. And there's no industry on Fisher's Island. I think so even though our oysters are close to shore, there's 3 houses, we just don't have any industry near us.
I'm going to ask you the toughest question you've probably ever been asked. How do we know climate change is real?
Well,
Steve, she looks at you.
He is the scientist.
I would say I am firmly behind the science. I believe the science, and I think when all the scientists line up, I think it's 98% are on one side, and there are 2% on the other side, and those 2% generally have some sort of ulterior motive for why they don't buy into the science. But I think that there have just been so many studies that have been done where we just passed a landmark level in CO2 in our atmosphere. We have these great records in the ice sheets that tell us how much carbon dioxide there's been, and when we have these, climate change obviously is a natural phenomenon, but when we look at this data, this ancient data, we see the changes that we're experiencing taking thousands of years to happen, and they're and now they're happening in decades rather than millennia. I can't say that our farm has been affected, except for the increased frequency of storms. Storms are a big problem for us. But there have certainly been other areas that have been affected by ocean acidification, which is a consequence of the carbon that we're putting into the atmosphere. It almost destroyed the industry in the Northwest, and we have a friend and a farm in Maine that almost prevented him from producing in his hatchery because of the decrease in the pH that he saw. So now he has to modify the water that comes into his hatchery. And he's been doing it as long as we have. Never had to do that until about 5 years ago.
So for the folks who didn't listen to my episode with Ocean Conservancy with Ryan Ono, can you just explain a little bit what ocean acidification is in a simple form?
Yeah, so a very significant percentage of the carbon that we're putting into the atmosphere through all sorts of mechanisms, a significant part of that ends up getting dissolved in the ocean. And when it gets dissolved in the ocean, there are chemical reactions that occur that alter the pH of the water. And this has been very, very well documented. And there's, I think that we've documented now during the last few decades that the pH has decreased by about 0.2 points, and it's a logarithmic scale, so that's very significant. And it's a problem for shellfish farmers because that pH determines chemical reactions that make calcium carbonate available. So if the pH gets too low, it's not possible for a shellfish to create shell. And it's particularly a problem with the larvae.
Boom, that's huge. That's huge. Thank you for elaborating. So before we get off here, I just want to talk a little bit, because I like I said before, I want to do a whole episode on Shellfish Growers Climate Coalition, because it's just doing positive things for the environment and just getting people aware of everything that's going on. But just could you talk about that a little bit?
Well, that was Bill Mook. It was Bill Mook's idea for Mook Sea Farm. And he gathered, I think, 6 farmers together, 7 farmers together from around the country. And particularly the Northwest and Maine oyster farms were having the ocean acidification problems. And we just felt that we could offer our stories of what's happening to our farms and share them in a way that might resonate with people who don't realize what's happening. We sort of feel like we know we're the canaries in the coal mine, and you can't grow oysters anymore. There's it's bad for everything. And the important thing about our coalition is that oyster farmers are like all farmers in that they're Republicans, Democrats, apolitical, non-political. We've got all the types. And so we all are struggling with the same problems. And so if we can bring us together to share our stories, we feel that we are a group that can, that whether you're, that we can speak with Republican Congress people and Democratic Congress people, and we could bring them together and push the needle on lowering our carbon output. And we've gotten to be, we're over 200 members. We're not only oyster farmers, but we're also seafood distributors, restaurants, chefs, which is very important to us because, we're out on this island, our farms are all over the place, and chefs and restaurants and shuckers actually tell our stories. They're the ones who connect our stories with consumers. And so that's also a very important part of our group, is using shuckers and chefs and restaurant managers to get this message out to consumers, so they don't just so they think about where their oysters come from and think about what it means, what it would mean not to have oysters. That would mean not to have a lot of other things too.
Yes, it would. So I'm going to wrap this up, but I do want everybody to go try some Fisher Island oysters. Where can we get them from? Can we buy them directly from you?
Yes, you can. Just go to fishersislandoysters.com and talk to Molly, our daughter.
No doubt. So are any raw bars open up there? Because I know they're starting to open up a little bit down here.
Yeah, well, Connecticut has been open more than New York during the whole pandemic. And we're seeing particularly in the last 2 weeks, it seems like things are really getting going again. There aren't a lot of raw bars in our area. It's not like New York City.
Right.
We do have a great one right across the way from us, the Oyster Club. And then there's another one, Shipwright's Daughter is also in Mystic. Mystic is a neat little happening town.
No raw bars on Fisher's Island.
Right, got you. So, oh man, I don't forgot my question right now. Boom, boom, boom. I don't know what I was gonna say. You guys have me stumped.
Well,
So I guess social media, you guys do the social media thing? That's how I found you.
we try to. Our daughter Molly's helping us out, and
Mm-hmm.
we feel it's a great way to connect with people who love oysters. And also, I just like to say actually something about the Billion Oyster Project, Gardner.
Of course. Since we missed that episode, they didn't hear it, but yeah, Billion Oyster, we did a great episode, and somehow the audio got lost and you guys never heard it. So
No, we didn't. But I would just like to say, it's sort of like the Shellfish Growers Climate Coalition, in that the Billion Oyster Party that brings all these oyster farmers together. We all are isolated. We all work in our own farm, do our own thing, and that is so much fun. And between that and our getting together with shellfish growers from around the country with the coalition, it's added just a lot of camaraderie and support for each other. And it was great during this pandemic because we kept in touch and really felt for everyone's pain, and it was commiserated. And just between those two, we didn't feel so isolated. Everyone felt better. So that's the only reason I wanted to bring them up, is that they were great. They're great for bringing oyster farmers together.
well, that made me remember my question also. And it was basically the changes that the pandemic has caused. Like, far as numbers, how I mean, you don't have to do exact, but like, how big of a change has it been since the pandemic been going on?
So the last year, the last week of February, we had a great week. We shipped out a ton of oysters, one of our better weeks. And the week after, we shipped out 0.
Wow.
Just like flipping a switch. And and that's when our daughter went to work on, trying to get this e-commerce going for us. And that got us back to shipping some oysters. And then during this whole pandemic, there have been some oysters, a couple in DC, a couple in Chicago that have been customers of ours that were still using oysters. I don't think the restaurants were open. I think they were doing pop-up takeout type stuff. But we kind of limped through it, shipping out about half of what we normally do.
But I think we felt the same as also a lot of other farms. We had a lot of support from our community. And if you dug down deep into who was buying our oysters and getting them shipped to family and friends, it was connections. It was friends of friends of friends, relatives. I mean, we had nieces and nephews ordering oysters, and we were a little embarrassed about that, but we felt a lot of love and support from our community. And I think a lot of oyster farmers did as well.
Well, I think that's really been key for everybody, just family coming together and helping each other during these times. So, why wouldn't it be the same thing for, the oyster farmers also?
Yep. Really appreciated that.
Can you guys hear me? I think I'm losing connection.
Now we can. We lost you for a minute.
All right, so that must be a sign that we're going to end this podcast right now. And thank you guys for taking time out of your busy days of killing the oyster game, and appreciate you.
We
Thank you.
appreciate you too, and look forward to seeing you soon.
Of course,
And-
of course.
and we're gonna send you some information on the coalition, because you need to be a member.
I think our
I'm
nurse,
already in.
Oh,
he's in.
sorry.
Yeah, I'm in.
Sorry.
I'm in. But today I did share a post on my Instagram because you don't have to be an oyster farmer or a chef to join. It's important for anybody who thinks this thing is important to join. So to all my listeners out there, go to the site. I'll post the site in the description, and you guys can check it out for yourself. But I'm a part of it, and I stand with it and beside it, and we're all standing together. So, go check it out.
That's right.
All right, you guys be safe, okay?
You too.
too.
Thanks a lot.
Bye-bye.
See you.